Archaeologists are discovering a great deal about the Saul's culture. For example, recent excavations have unearthed smelting furnaces and tools of smelted copper and bronze. There were distinct Saul's words for copper and for bronze, but not for iron. Thus, the Sauls did not smelt iron. So for this, I did I diagrammed it.
Okay. Did you find your conclusion first?
Yes.
All right, what was your conclusion?
So Sauls did not smell iron.
Awesome. All right, and then how did you diagram it?
So I did so S negative I, and so I did SCB.
Okay, so if the S, we know that there were copper and bronze, but if it was S, we know that there was no words for iron. Okay, so just to make sure we understand all this, we're saying archaeologists are discovering a great deal about the Saul's culture. For example, recent excavations have unearthed smelting furnaces and tools of smelted copper and bronze. There were distinct Saul's words for copper and bronze, but none for iron. Thus, the Sauls did not smelt iron. Where is the jump? Okay, sorry. Mistake is okay. What kind of question is this first?
So is it a conclusion question?
No, no, go ahead and read this out loud and tell me what you think it's asking you to do.
It wants me to know why did Sauls did not smell iron, but I'm not sure what that question type is.
Okay, so what this is saying is the conclusion drawn above, so this conclusion here follows logically or would be valid if which of the following is assumed.
So assumption question?
Yeah, it's an assumption question.
Okay.
But since we have if and assume, it's going to be a sufficient assumption question, which means that we're going to take an answer choice from here and we're going to add it to our stimulus and it's going to guarantee this conclusion. So right now, this is a flawed argument. What could we say that would guarantee this conclusion? That the Sauls did not smell iron. I want you to predict something.
There weren't any words for it.
Well, we already know there were no words, right? So what must there not being a word mean? What assumption are they making?
That they didn't smelt iron.
Yes, but why, like, what are they assuming about there not being a word about iron? Like, if they did smell iron, what do you think they would have?
A word for it?
Yes. So if we said if the Sauls smelted iron, then they would have a word for it, would that guarantee this conclusion?
Yes.
Yes. So do you see how that's the assumption? Go ahead and go through these or start with A and tell me if you like it, love it, or sorry, like it or love it, leave it or hate it.
Okay. So if a culture had a distinct word for metal, then it smelted that metal. Okay, so like it.
Okay, but okay, so so this is saying if we have a word for it, then you smelted it. If you don't smelt it, that means you don't have a word for it. Okay, keep going.
If a culture was unfamiliar with a metal, then it did not have a distinct word for that metal.
What do you think about that one?
Okay, I don't love it. I don't like it.
But do we care just because, well, just because if a culture was unfamiliar with a metal, then it did not have a distinct word for that metal? We already know. Okay, so if we were going to diagram this, it would be if you were unfamiliar with a metal, you did not have a word for it. We already know that for iron that we don't have a word for it. Does that help us get to them not smelting?
No.
Not at all? No. So it can't be B.
So if a culture smelted copper, and bronze, it had distinct words for copper and bronze. So I don't feel like it's helping at all.
Right. Yeah, it's like, okay, cool about copper and bronze, but we're not talking about copper, or our conclusion isn't talking about copper and bronze.
If a culture did not smell a metal, then it was unfamiliar with that metal.
What's wrong with this one right away?
A metal.
Yes, but it's saying if a culture did not smelt a metal. So if introduces our sufficient condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's saying if you don't melt, if you do not smelt metal, so I'm gonna say that means that you are unfamiliar with it. We're trying to prove
The
that
word.
we did not smelt iron.
Yeah.
So we don't have it in the sufficient. Like this doesn't help us get anywhere.
If a culture smelted a metal, then it had a distinct word for that metal. So here, like in my question, I was in between A and E, and I chose A just because I didn't know how to distinguish A and E.
Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and erase all of this at the bottom, and we're just gonna look at A and E. Okay, so what A is saying, I'm gonna do this one in red. So what A is saying is if a culture has a word for a metal, then it smelted that metal, right?
Yeah.
So what is the contrapositive of A?
So negative SM,
So if you don't smelt a metal, then
arrow, negative
you don't
W.
have a word for it. Excellent. How would you diagram E?
So SM, and then metal.
A word for it, right?
Yeah.
And then what's the contrapositive of that?
So negative W, and then arrow, metal, like SM.
Awesome. So in our stimulus, do we know if we do we um do we know for certain in our stimulus that iron has a word for it, or that we don't smelt that metal?
No.
No. So neither of these sufficient conditions are triggered. But if we look at E, do we know in our stimulus for sure that either we have a smelted metal or we don't have a word for something?
Yes.
Yes, we know that there were no words for iron. So what happens when there's not a word for something
No smelting.
of metal? Yes. So does that make sense why E is the correct
Yes,
answer?
guys.
Awesome. So you just picked the contrapositive.
The contrapositive, yeah.
You picked the most tempting wrong answer for sure.